On a brutally cold winter night, a young homeless girl wandered the streets, shivering as she searched for anywhere she could curl up and make it through the darkness. But just as she crossed an empty stretch of road, a motorcycle suddenly lost control, skidding sideways before slamming hard into a metal guardrail. Startled, she froze, then bolted toward the wreck. The rider lay crumpled on the pavement, motionless, blood running down his face in a dark stream. She dropped beside him, pressed her trembling hands against the wound, and begged him to stay with her, despite knowing the police might question someone like her just for being there. What she didn't realize was that in only a few days, this same stranger would return and change her life in a way she never believed possible. The winter wind cut through the empty streets like a blade, sharp enough to sting Alia's cheeks as she wandered along the cracked sidewalk. Every breath billowed in front of her like steam rising from a dying fire. Her thin hoodie was no match for the cold, but she didn't stop walking. Stopping meant freezing. Stopping meant thinking about how she had nowhere to go. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not any night. She kept her eyes low, scanning for places she might tuck herself away until morning. Maybe the boarded-up bus stop near the river. Maybe behind the dumpster behind Grant's Market, if the raccoons weren't out again. She tightened her backpack straps and pulled the hood tighter around her ears. The night felt endless, and so did the search for somewhere, anywhere she wouldn't be chased away. Then the silence shattered. A harsh metallic screech ripped across the road, so sharp and sudden it made her heart leap into her throat. She jerked her head toward the sound, just in time to see a motorcycle fishtail wildly across the slick pavement. Sparks burst like fireworks under the skidding metal. The bike slammed into a steel guardrail with a violent crack that echoed through the frozen air. Alia gasped. Her feet moved before her mind caught up. She sprinted toward the crash, the cold forgotten. Her breath heaved as she reached the mangled bike, and the man sprawled beside it. His helmet was half-buckled, his body twisted unnaturally, his clothes torn. Blood trickled down his forehead, warm and bright against the icy ground. Oh no. Alia dropped to her knees, the gravel biting into her legs. Her hands shook as she pressed her palms against the deep gash along his hairline. Blood seeped through her fingers, warm and terrifying. Hey, stay with me, she whispered, her voice trembling. Don't fall asleep, okay? Don't do that. The man's eyelids fluttered weakly. His breath came in broken, shallow pulls. She leaned closer, trying to shield him from the cold wind. You're gonna be okay, she murmured, even though panic clutched her chest. She knew how this looked. A homeless girl alone at a crash scene, her hands covered in someone else's blood. The police wouldn't listen. They never did. But she stayed anyway. Helping wasn't a choice. It was instinct. His lips parted, barely forming a sound. She leaned closer, and his faint, raspy whisper reached her. Please, don't leave. Her heart squeezed. I won't, she whispered. I'm right here. I promise. She pressed harder against the wound, praying someone would drive by, praying help would come. The cold bit at her hands, her knees, her face. But she didn't move. A stranger's life was slipping through her fingers, and she had no idea that saving him would become the moment that changed hers forever. But just when Alia thought things couldn't get worse, she realized something that sent a new wave of panic through her. They were completely alone, and the man's breathing was getting weaker by the second. Alia's breath came out in shaky bursts, fogging the cold night air as she pressed her hands harder against the bleeding wound. The man's skin felt colder now, his chest rising in uneven, fragile motions. His breathing sounded like air fighting through broken glass. She forced herself not to panic, but fear curled tight in her stomach, twisting deeper with every second that passed. Come on, stay with me, she whispered, leaning close so he could hear her through the wind. Help's gotta come soon, someone has to pass by. Her eyes darted up and down the road. Nothing. Not a single car, not a single headlight cutting through the night. Only silence, the faint hiss of leaking gasoline, and the raw thump of her heart ringing in her ears. Alia swallowed hard. No. Somebody has to be out here, she muttered. It's a highway, people drive highways. But tonight the road felt abandoned, like the whole world had turned its back on her, and this broken stranger at her knees. His body twitched painfully. The movement made her flinch. "Hey!" she said, her voice cracking. "Don't move, just breathe, please, just breathe!" She wasn't sure if she was talking to him or herself anymore. The wound wasn't stopping. Blood seeped through her sleeves, staining them a dark, frightening shade. Her hands felt slick. Her voice trembled. She scanned the darkness again, desperation rising. Nothing, no headlights, no figures, no sound of engines, just the freezing wind. Her mind raced. If she left him, even for a moment, to find help, he might not survive. But if she stayed, he might still die, and she'd have no way to call for anyone. Her heart hammered painfully. "I can't just sit here," she whispered. "You're fading. I can tell you're fading." The man coughed weakly, a sound so soft it barely existed. His fingers twitched toward her wrist, searching, reaching. She grabbed his hand instantly. "I'm here," she whispered again. "I'm not leaving. I swear I'm not leaving." His lips moved again, a whisper so faint she had to lean close to hear it. "Angel, don't go." The word froze her. Angel. Nobody had ever called her anything but trouble, nuisance, stray, waste, never something gentle, never something that sounded like hope. Her throat tightened, but she didn't let go. "I'm not going anywhere," she assured him, even though fear gnawed at her ribs. "But I need to get help, or you won't." Her voice broke. She pressed her hands harder. The cold wind howled past them. Her knees were numb from kneeling. His breathing grew thinner, each inhale slower than the last. If she didn't move now, she would lose him. Her pulse thudded in her ears as she looked back down the empty highway, her stomach twisting with dread. Because suddenly she understood the truth. If she wanted to save him, she would have to run and leave him alone, at least for a moment. With his life slipping away in her hands, Aaliyah has to make the impossible choice. Stay and watch him fade, or run for help and risk returning too late. Aaliyah stared down at him, her breath trembling as his eyelids flickered in and out of consciousness. Every shallow rise of his chest felt weaker than the last. She could see it, the way his body was giving up, slipping inch by inch towards something she couldn't pull him back from alone. Her heart pounded painfully. "I have to get help," she whispered, almost apologizing. "If I stay here, you won't make it." His fingers twitched, barely catching the edge of her sleeve. That tiny touch nearly broke her. "I'll come back," she promised. "I swear on everything I have, I will come back." She slid her hoodie under his head to lift him off the freezing pavement. Her hands hesitated for one last moment on his cheek, brushing away blood that kept trickling along the curve of his jaw. "Hold on," she breathed. "Just hold on until I get someone." Then she ran. The cold hit her like a wall as she pushed off the ground, her legs burning instantly. The road stretched long and dark ahead of her, the only light coming from distant street lamps that flickered against the wind. Her backpack bounced wildly with each step, but she didn't feel its weight. Every part of her was focused on the single, desperate thought repeating in her mind. "Please don't die. Please don't die before I get back." Gravel scattered under her shoes as she sprinted, lungs screaming for air. The icy wind clawed at her face, slicing against her cheeks. Her throat burned with each gasp, but she didn't stop. 1/2 a mile. That's all it was. 1/2 a mile to the diner she'd passed earlier, the only place that might have people awake at this hour. Her legs shook, but she pushed harder. "Come on! Come on!" she cried under her breath. "Somebody has to be there!" She rounded the bend and saw the faint neon glow of the diner sign flickering in the dark. Relief flooded her so fast she nearly stumbled. She gathered the last bit of strength in her shaking legs, sprinting across the gravel lot until her palms slapped against the glass door. She shoved it open with all her weight. The bell overhead shrieked loudly as she practically fell inside. Warm air hit her first, then dozens of eyes. People stared. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations stopped. Aaliyah bent over, gripping her knees, breathing so hard she tasted metal. "Please," she gasped out. "There's a man. He crashed. He's bleeding. He's dying. Please, call 911. Somebody, please." Her voice cracked so violently that the word "please" came out as a choke. The room went quiet. Too quiet. Then someone scoffed. Another muttered, "Here we go." Their eyes didn't see her desperation. They didn't see the blood drying stiff along her sleeves. They only saw a homeless girl stumbling into their neatly lit diner late at night. A problem, a nuisance, a story they felt they'd heard before. Aaliyah's heart dropped into her stomach. "No, no, please," she begged, stepping forward with trembling hands. "He's really hurt. He might die." But the looks on their faces only hardened, and for the second time tonight Aaliyah realized she was completely, utterly alone. Just when it seems no one will believe her, one unexpected voice speaks up, shifting everything. For a moment, the diner felt frozen in time. A room full of warm lights and cold hearts. Aaliyah stood trembling near the doorway, her breath sharp and uneven, her sleeves stiff with someone else's blood. She kept waiting for someone, anyone, to react like a human being. But instead, whispers rippled through the room. "She's probably looking for money." Another stunt. "Homeless kids always got a story." Aaliyah's vision blurred with humiliation and panic. She stepped forward, hands shaking. "Please, I'm not lying. He's bleeding. We're not getting involved," a man at the counter snapped, not bothering to look at her. "We don't need trouble tonight." Her chest tightened with a sharp ache. She could almost feel time slipping through her fingers, time the injured biker didn't have. She swallowed hard, trying not to cry. Then a voice spoke. "Hold on." It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was steady, like someone finally deciding the right thing needed to be done. Aaliyah turned. In the far booth, near the window, an older woman slowly rose to her feet. She had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, deep wrinkles that suggested a life full of both hardship and kindness, and eyes that looked at Aaliyah not with suspicion, but with recognition. "What did you say happened, child?" she asked gently. Aaliyah's throat tightened. "A man crashed his motorcycle. He's bleeding badly. He can't move. I tried to stop the bleeding, but he needs an ambulance. He might—" Her voice broke again. The woman didn't hesitate. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket. "I'll call 911, she said. Aaliyah nearly collapsed with relief. But as the woman began dialing, the same man at the counter scoffed loudly. "Oh, come on, Margaret, you're falling for this. She's probably trying to lure someone out." Margaret's gaze sharpened as she turned toward him. "If you saw what I see in this child's eyes, you'd understand there's no lie here, and even if there was, are we really the kind of people who ignore someone begging for help?" The man muttered under his breath but said nothing more. Aaliyah pressed her shaking hands to her face. For the first time that night, she didn't feel invisible. Margaret placed the phone against her ear. "Yes, this is an emergency. A motorcycle accident on Route 19, near the bend past the old gas station. Send someone quickly. The victim is losing blood." Aaliyah held her breath through the short silence that followed. When Margaret nodded and said, "Thank you," it felt like the world shifted. Hope, thin, fragile, but real, pierced through the panic. Margaret approached her. "They're on their way. You said you stayed with him." Aaliyah nodded. "I left my hoodie under his head. I couldn't stay if I wanted help." "You did exactly what you should have done." The woman's hand rested on her shoulder. "Come on, we'll get back to him." Aaliyah blinked in shock. "You're coming with me?" "Of course. No one should face something like that alone." They headed for the door, leaving the silent, guilty diner behind them. As Aaliyah stepped out into the cold again, her heart hammered with fear and hope fighting for space inside her. The man was still alive when she left him, but if she didn't get back fast enough, he might not be when she returned. But when Aaliyah and Margaret reached the crash site, something is terribly, frighteningly wrong. The cold air felt sharper this time, cutting straight through Aaliyah as she and Margaret hurried down the road toward the crash site. Margaret walked beside her with surprising speed for her age, her flashlight beams slicing across the pavement in steady arcs. But Aaliyah's heartbeat drowned out everything. Every crunch of gravel, every gust of wind, every careful footstep. All she could think was, "Please be alive, please still be breathing." The bend in the road came into view. the guardrail now only a dark silhouette against the night sky. Aaliyah quickened her pace, breath misting in frantic bursts. "Almost there," Margaret said softly, keeping up. But the moment they reached the spot, Aaliyah froze. The bike was still there, sprawled across the road, metal twisted and headlights dimming. Her hoodie was still on the ground, but the man was gone. Aaliyah's breath caught, choking her. "No, no, no, no! He was right here! He couldn't have moved! He couldn't even open his eyes!" She ran to the spot where he'd been lying and dropped to her knees. The ground was stained with blood, too much of it, dark patches drying into the pavement. But the man was nowhere. "Where is he?" Aaliyah cried, her voice breaking. "He couldn't walk! He couldn't! Someone took him!" Margaret crouched beside her, shining the flashlight slowly across the road. "There's no footprints! No tire marks! Nothing!" Aaliyah's hands shook as she grabbed the edge of her hoodie. It was soaked, stiff with dried blood. The cold fabric felt like ice in her palms. "He was alive," she whispered. "He was breathing when I left him. He asked me not to go." Margaret gently touched her shoulder. "Maybe someone else stopped. Maybe they took him to the hospital." "No," Aaliyah said instantly. "We would have seen another car. We would have heard something. And why would they leave the bike? Why leave everything?" Margaret had no answer. Aaliyah looked back toward the deserted road, chest tightening until it hurt to breathe. The silence felt unnatural now, too heavy, too absolute, the kind of silence that shouldn't exist when someone has just vanished. What if... Aaliyah swallowed hard. What if he woke up and wandered off? Maybe he was disoriented. Maybe he didn't know where he was. Margaret slowly shook her head. With this much blood loss... No, he wouldn't get far, if he even stood up at all. Aaliyah's stomach twisted painfully. "I shouldn't have run," she whispered. "I should have stayed." "You saved him," Margaret corrected softly. "He needed someone to call for help, and you did that. Whatever happened after... That isn't your fault," but Aaliyah barely heard her, Ellie, because as she lifted her gaze toward the shadowed tree line across the road, something made her blood run cold. Branches were snapped, leaves crushed, and a dark smear, the same deep red as the blood on her sleeves, trailed faintly into the woods. Aaliyah's breath caught. "He didn't walk away," she whispered. "He was dragged." Margaret straightened, flashlight trembling slightly. "Aaliyah," she said in a low, careful voice, "we need to wait for the paramedics. Don't go in there." But Aaliyah was already taking a step toward the trees, because if someone dragged him, they might still be close. And if he was alive, he needed her more than ever. Ignoring every warning, Aaliyah follows the blood trail into the dark woods, and what she finds inside will change everything. The line of trees rose before her like a black wall, branches twisting into the night sky like skeletal fingers. Aaliyah stepped toward them slowly, the blood trail faint but unmistakable beneath the weak moonlight. Every instinct in her body screamed, "Stop, don't go back." But something stronger kept pushing her forward. She couldn't leave him. Not now. Not after everything. Margaret hurried after her, grabbing her wrist gently but firmly. "Aaliyah, wait. We don't know what's in there." "He needs help," Aaliyah said, her voice barely steady. "If someone dragged him, they could still be hurting him. I can't just stand here." "And you can't go alone," Margaret insisted. Before Aaliyah could answer, the distant wail of sirens echoed through the air. Relief briefly washed through Margaret's face. "They're coming," she said. "Let them handle this." But Aaliyah's eyes stayed locked on the shadows between the trees. What if they're too late? The sirens grew louder, closer, but so did something else, a rustle, a low crack of branches deeper in the woods. A sound too heavy to be an animal, too deliberate to be the wind. Aaliyah's heart pounded against her ribs. Margaret heard it too. Her hand tightened around Aaliyah's wrist. "Stay behind me." But Aaliyah gently pulled away. "I have to see." Before Margaret could argue again, Aaliyah stepped into the tree line, the cold darkness swallowing her immediately. The smell of pine and damp earth filled her nose. Her shoes crunched over leaves and twigs, each step sounding impossibly loud. She followed the trail, A streak of blood on a rock, a smear along a low branch, droplets soaking into patches of fallen snow. It was fresh. Too fresh. "He's close," Aaliyah whispered. Behind her, Margaret shone the flashlight nervously into the woods, its beam cutting through the darkness like a trembling sword. "Child, be careful," she murmured. Aaliyah pushed forward, deeper, her breath clouding in front of her. Every sense felt sharpened, every sound amplified. A branch snapped somewhere ahead and she froze. "Hello?" she called softly. "Can you hear me? Sir, it's me, from the road. I came back." Silence. Then, a low groan. Aaliyah's heart lurched. She spun toward the sound and hurried through a small thicket, branches snagging at her sleeves. She burst into a small clearing. And there he was. The biker lay slumped against the base of a tree, his body twisted sideways as if he'd tried desperately to pull himself upright. His helmet was gone. His breathing was shallow, but it was there. His eyes were half open, glazed with pain and confusion. Aaliyah dropped to her knees. "Oh my God, you're alive." He blinked, struggling to focus. His lips trembled. You came back," he whispered. "Of course I did," she said, her voice breaking. But before she could say anything more, Margaret gasped behind her. "Aaliyah, look." Aaliyah turned, and her stomach plummeted. Because the ground around them wasn't just marked with blood, there were footprints, large ones, fresh ones, circling, watching, like someone had been standing there moments before they arrived, and then disappeared. Just as Aaliyah realizes they're not alone in the woods, a branch snaps loudly behind them, and something moves in the darkness. Aaliyah's breath hitched as the sharp crack of a branch echoed behind them. Margaret swung the flashlight toward the sound, the beam jittering wildly across the trees. The light caught only darkness, thick, heavy, impenetrable. But something was there. Aaliyah felt it before she saw it. A cold prickle ran along her spine, the unmistakable sense of being watched. The injured biker stirred weakly, his breath ragged. She turned back to him, trying to steady her voice. "It's okay. We're here. Help is coming." But he wasn't looking at her. His unfocused eyes drifted past her shoulder, toward the darkness behind them. Aaliyah swallowed hard. "Sir, is someone out here? Did someone drag you?" His lips parted, but only a faint rasp came out. He tried to lift his hand, pointing shakily toward the trees, before his strength failed and his arm fell against his chest. Margaret's eyes widened. "We need to get out of here," she whispered urgently. "Whoever did this may still be close." Aaliyah shook her head. "He can't be moved. Not like this." Margaret hesitated, torn. "Then we need to make ourselves visible. The paramedics will reach the road first." Aaliyah nodded, but her eyes stayed locked on the shadows. The woods were too quiet, the air too still. Even the wind seemed to have stopped breathing. Another sound broke the silence. A faint rustle, deliberate and slow. Margaret stepped closer to Aaliyah, lowering her voice. "Stay behind me." But Aaliyah reached for a fallen branch instead, gripping it with trembling hands. "I'm not letting anything happen to him." The biker blinked weakly at her bravery, confusion and gratitude flickering faintly in his expression. Margaret's flashlight beam suddenly jerked to the left. "There!" The light caught movement, a dark shape slipping behind a tree, too fast to identify yet unmistakably human. Aaliyah's pulse skyrocketed. Her fingers tightened around the branch. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "Show yourself!" Silence answered. Then another sound. A low crunch of leaves. Closer this time. Margaret grabbed Aaliyah's arm. "We're leaving the woods now. I'll guide them back to him once the emergency team arrives." But Aaliyah shook her head fiercely. "I'm not leaving him alone again. Not even for a second." The biker let out a soft groan, his eyes squeezing shut. He was fading, fast. Aaliyah knelt beside him protectively. "Just hang on. We're not going anywhere." The sirens in the distance grew louder, closer, finally. Margaret exhaled in shaky relief. "Thank God." But Aaliyah didn't relax, because just as the wailing sirens cut through the air, something deep in the woods answered with a long, low exhale. A sound that didn't belong to the wind, or an animal, or anything she understood. The hair on her arms rose. Whatever was out there was watching them and waiting. As the sirens approach, a shadowed figure steps toward the clearing, and Aaliyah finally sees who has been stalking them. The sirens wailed louder, echoing through the woods, bouncing off the trunks like a warning bell. But even with help closing in, Aaliyah couldn't shake the ice-cold dread crawling up her spine. She clutched the branch tighter, knuckles white. Margaret swept her flashlight across the clearing again, and froze. "Aaliyah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Look." Aaliyah followed her gaze. Between two tree trunks, half hidden in shadow, stood a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, completely still. Watching them with an unnerving stillness that made the air feel heavier. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the figure took one slow step forward. The weak beam of Margaret's flashlight finally caught part of his face, or rather the lower half of it. A strong jaw, rough stubble, and a deep scratch running along his cheek. His hood was pulled low, hiding his eyes, but the tension in his stance told Aaliyah enough. This wasn't someone lost. This wasn't someone stumbling upon the accident. This was someone who'd been here the whole time. Aaliyah's throat tightened. You dragged him, didn't you?" she said, her voice trembling. "Why? What do you want?" The man didn't answer. Another step forward. Margaret grabbed Aaliyah's arm. "Back up, slowly." Aaliyah moved with her, keeping herself between the stranger and the injured biker. He was barely conscious now, his breaths shallow, his lips pale. She wasn't letting anyone near him. Not this man. Not anyone. The figure tilted his head slightly, as if studying her. The gesture wasn't curious. It was calculating. Another step. Crunch. Crunch. The sound of leaves under his boots sent chills down her spine. "Stop!" Aaliyah shouted, raising the branch like a weapon. "Don't come any closer!" The man paused for the first time. Then, in a low, gravelly voice, he spoke. "You shouldn't be here," Aaliyah's breath caught. "Why? What did you do to him?" The man didn't reply, but his jaw clenched, a flash of something like frustration crossing his face before he took another step toward them. Margaret tugged harder. "We have to go, now!" Aaliyah hesitated, torn between fear and the desperate need to protect the helpless biker behind her. Then the sirens blared again, much closer this time. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees, and in a heartbeat, the man vanished. Not ran, not stumbled, just melted back into the woods like he'd never existed. Aaliyah stared at the empty patch of darkness where he'd stood, her pulse thundering in her ears. What was that?" she whispered. Margaret exhaled shakily. "Someone who didn't want to be seen." The paramedics burst into the clearing a moment later, flashlights sweeping over them. Aaliyah stepped back, pointing at the biker, heart pounding. "He's here! He's alive! But he needs help right now!" As they rushed to him, Aaliyah couldn't stop looking at the trees, whoever that man was. He hadn't come to help, and she had a terrible feeling this wasn't the last time she'd see him. As paramedics fight to stabilize the biker, they discover something in his pocket, something that reveals he isn't just anyone. He's someone extremely important. The clearing flooded with voices. Paramedics shouting vitals, radios crackling, EMT bags snapping open. Red and blue lights pulsed through the trees, casting long shadows that still made Aaliyah shiver. Two medics knelt beside the biker, assessing him with practiced urgency. Severe blood loss. Possible fracture. Pulse weak but present. "Let's get him hooked up, now." Aaliyah stood back with Margaret, watching anxiously as they worked. She wasn't ready to breathe yet, not until they said the words she needed to hear. One of the medics checked the biker's pockets for ID. "Got a wallet," he said, pulling out something black and sleek. "Maybe we can find a name." He flipped it open under his flashlight and froze. "What is it?" the second medic asked. The man hesitated, then lifted the laminated card inside. Aaliyah caught a glimpse. Embossed lettering, a gold seal and a corporate logo she didn't recognize but felt important. Margaret gasped softly. "Is that—" The medic read aloud. "Soulborn Enterprises, Executive Identification, Name: Ethan K. Solborn. Aaliyah blinked. The name meant nothing to her. Who is he? The medics exchanged a look, the kind that said, you really don't know. Solborn Enterprises, the first medic said. They own half of the tech developments in the state. Infrastructure, renewable energy, transportation. Basically everything. Margaret's eyes widened. You're saying this man is… Yeah, the medic replied. A billionaire, one of the youngest on record, too. Aaliyah's heart dropped into her stomach. Billionaire. She had saved a billionaire? A billionaire was lying in the dirt, bleeding, because she was the only person who stopped. Her mind spun. She remembered how he'd whispered, Angel, don't go. He'd looked at her like she was the only person left in the world. And now, he was someone with more power, influence and wealth than she could comprehend. But before she could even process that, the medic added something else. And this ID, he tapped the card. It's marked as a high security clearance. That means someone like him shouldn't be traveling alone. Aaliyah's pulse quickened. Then why was he? No idea, the medic said, but he shouldn't have been out here in the middle of the night without a driver or security. Margaret frowned. Unless someone targeted him. At that, the medics paused. Aaliyah felt her stomach twist. Her eyes drifted back to the tree line, to the place where the mysterious man had stood watching them minutes earlier. What if, she whispered, the person who dragged him was trying to finish what the crash didn't? Margaret's expression darkened. And you interrupted them! Aaliyah felt a cold wave wash over her. The medics began loading Ethan onto the stretcher. We need to move now, one of them said. He's not stable. Aaliyah watched helplessly as they lifted him, her chest aching, the billionaire she'd tried to save. Someone had tried to hide. Someone had tried to hurt. And whoever it was, they were still out there, watching. At the hospital, Aaliyah learns that Ethan's condition is far worse than she realized, and someone arrives who definitely doesn't want her involved. The ambulance tore through the night, lights flashing against the hospital's glass entrance as nurses rushed forward with a stretcher. Aaliyah and Margaret followed as far as the sliding doors, breathless and shaken, watching through the chaos as Ethan was pushed down a long hallway. Aaliyah pressed her hand to the glass, whispering, Please make it. A security guard stepped in front of her immediately. You can't go back there, miss. Aaliyah nodded, still catching her breath. I know, I just want to make sure he's okay. I found him. I helped him. The guard gave her a long, skeptical look, the same kind she'd gotten in the diner. Margaret stepped beside her. This girl saved that man's life. She has every right to know what's happening. But before the guard could respond, a woman in an expensive suit stormed through the double doors. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile, her expression carved from ice. Her sleek black hair was pinned in a tight twist, and a badge on her jacket read, Solborn Private Security. She stopped in front of them, eyes narrowing. Which one of you is Aaliyah? Aaliyah swallowed hard. Me. The woman crossed her arms. I'm Agent Carter. I handle security for Mr. Ethan Solborn. I understand you were at the scene of the crash. Aaliyah nodded. Yes, he was hurt, bad. I did everything I could. Agent Carter's gaze swept over her clothes, her messy hair, the dried blood staining her sleeves. Something judgmental flickered in her eyes. Why were you there? She asked coldly. Aaliyah blinked. I was walking. I saw the crash. Walking where? Aaliyah hesitated, her face warming with embarrassment. Just around. Carter's jaw tightened. So you just happened to be alone at night in the middle of a rural highway during a high-speed accident that nearly killed a multi-million-dollar asset? Aaliyah's stomach twisted. He's a person, not an asset. That's not for you to decide. Margaret bristled. Young lady, this child saved his life. Show some respect. Carter ignored her. She stepped closer to Aaliyah, lowering her voice. Mr. Solborn is currently undergoing emergency surgery. His condition is critical. Her eyes sharpened. And until we know what really happened, you are not to go anywhere near him. Understood? Aaliyah felt the sting of unfairness claw at her. Why? I didn't hurt him. Then you have nothing to worry about, Carter said, unfazed. But I will be verifying your story, thoroughly. She turned sharply and disappeared back through the doors. Aaliyah stared after her, heart aching. Margaret placed a steady hand on her shoulder. She's just doing her job, don't let her shake you. But Aaliyah couldn't shake the sinking fear in her gut. What if she thinks I had something to do with it? Aaliyah whispered. Margaret sighed softly. Then you tell the truth. He's alive because of you, and they'll see that. A nurse approached them. You two can wait in the lobby. It may take several hours. Aaliyah nodded, following Margaret toward the rows of plastic chairs. Just before she sat down, she looked back at the surgical doors. Hang on, Ethan Shea, please. But she had no idea that while she prayed for him, someone else had already arrived at the hospital, someone watching her. As Aaliyah waits, a stranger quietly takes the seat beside her, and he knows exactly who she is. Hours passed, painfully slowly. Nurses rushed back and forth, intercoms buzzed, but no one came out with news. Not yet. Aaliyah sat hunched forward, elbows on her knees, exhaustion and worry pulling at her bones. Margaret dozed lightly beside her, her head tilted against the wall. The waiting room was nearly empty now, nearly. At some point, a man in a dark coat quietly entered and sat 2 chairs away from Aaliyah. She barely noticed him at first, not until she felt, more than saw, his eyes on her. Slowly, she turned her head. He wasn't like the other patients' families. He sat too still, his posture too controlled, his gaze too sharp. He looked like someone who'd spent his life reading people for a living, and he was staring directly at her. Aaliyah shifted uncomfortably. Can I help you? The man smiled a little, not kindly, not warmly, just knowingly. I hear you were the one who found Ethan. Aaliyah's stomach tightened. How do you know his name? Who are you? The man reached into his coat slowly. Aaliyah's breath hitched, and pulled out a slim ID badge. Solborn Enterprises, Senior Security Division. Name, Jonathan Pierce. Aaliyah exhaled, though not with relief. Something about him still felt off. Pierce tucked the badge away and leaned back casually. I've been briefed on the situation. Quite the night you've had. Aaliyah swallowed. I didn't do anything wrong. I never said you did. His tone was calm, almost too calm. But, he continued, Mr. Solborn is a highly important individual, someone with sensitive connections. It's my job to understand everything that happened tonight. Aaliyah nodded slowly. I understand. Pierce tilted his head slightly. You said you were just walking on the highway when the accident occurred. Yes. Interesting place for a walk, in winter, past midnight. She bristled. I didn't choose that place. I just didn't have anywhere else to go. Pierce's eyes flickered, not with sympathy but calculation. So you're homeless? It wasn't a question. Aaliyah looked away. Yes. Pierce tapped his fingers thoughtfully on his knee. Tell me, did you see anyone else at the scene? Anyone who might have caused the crash? Aaliyah hesitated, images flashed through her mind. The jarring crash, the blood, the shadow in the trees, the man with the scratch on his cheek. She swallowed hard. I don't know. Pierce studied her face carefully, as if weighing every twitch, every blink. Are you sure? Aaliyah nodded again, though her heart pounded. Something about this man made her feel unsafe in a way even the forest stranger hadn't. Pierce leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low. For your sake, Aaliyah, be honest. If someone else was there, we need to know. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, a doctor burst through the double doors. A family of Ethan Solborn? Pierce stood immediately. That's me. Aaliyah froze. Family. Security didn't count as family. Then she realized he wasn't lying to the doctor. He was lying to her. The doctor's face was grave. He made it through surgery, but he's unconscious, and we won't know the extent of the damage until he wakes. Aaliyah exhaled in shaky relief. He was alive. But Pierce wasn't looking at her anymore. He was already walking toward the doctor, voice lowered so she couldn't hear. She watched his back, and something deep in her gut screamed that this man had his own agenda, and she was somehow part of it. When Ethan finally wakes up, the first name he whispers isn't his security team's. It's Aaliyah's, and that changes everything. 2 more days passed in a blur of anxiety, cold cafeteria meals, and restless half-sleep in stiff lobby chairs. Margaret stayed for as long as she could, but eventually she had to return home, promising to check back later. Aaliyah remained, partly because she cared, partly because she had nowhere else to go, and partly because she felt a strange responsibility she didn't fully understand. Ethan Solborn. A billionaire, a man she'd met only because the universe had thrown her into the right place at the worst moment. A man who should have had an entire fleet of security personnel looking after him, yet somehow ended up bleeding alone on a frozen road. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him lying there again, and every time she wondered who that shadow figure in the woods had been, and what he wanted. Aaliyah sat in the corner of the waiting room, trying to stay awake, when Agent Carter appeared again. "You're still here," she said flatly. Aaliyah nodded. "I just want to know if he's okay." "You're not allowed in his room." "I know, I'm not asking to go in. I just want to know if he's—" Her voice softened. "Alive." Carter's expression didn't change, but her voice did. Just slightly. "He's stable, still unconscious." Aaliyah exhaled. Relief washed over her, but it was brief, because Pierce walked toward them, phone in hand, face unreadable. "Move," he said curtly to Carter. "We need her." Aaliyah tensed. "Need me for what?" Pierce didn't answer. He simply motioned for her to follow. Reluctantly, she did. They approached a door with a security officer standing guard. Pierce nodded, and the guard stepped aside. The door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit recovery room. And there he was. Ethan, bandaged, pale, still. Hooked to machines that beeped steadily, reassuringly. Aaliyah froze in the doorway. Pierce gave her a sharp look. "Don't touch anything. Don't speak unless spoken to." Carter shot him a warning glare but stayed quiet. A nurse adjusted Ethan's IV line, then paused. "He's been showing small signs of responsiveness, a few muscle movements, some attempts to vocalize." Aaliyah's heart fluttered. "Vocalize?" The nurse stepped back. "We'll give him a moment. Sometimes familiar voices help." Pierce immediately stepped forward. "Ethan, it's Jonathan. You're safe. You're in the hospital. If you hear me, move your hand." Nothing. Carter tried next. "Mr. Solborn, it's Carter. Your team is here. You're secure." Still nothing. Aaliyah stayed silent, but Ethan's eyelids twitched. The nurse whispered, "Try a softer tone. Something emotional." Pierce frowned. "Emotional? He doesn't respond to that." Carter rolled her eyes. "Just try something different." They spoke again. Nothing. Finally, the nurse sighed. "You, the girl, come here." Aaliyah blinked in surprise. "Me?" Pierce shot the nurse a look. "That's unnecessary." The nurse ignored him. "He responded strongest when you were at the scene, according to the report. Trauma patients often react to the last person they remember." Aaliyah swallowed hard and stepped closer to the bed. She hesitated, then whispered, "Ethan, it's Aaliyah. You're okay now. You're safe. I'm here." For a moment, the room stayed utterly still. Then, Ethan's fingers twitched. The monitor beeped faster. His lips moved, cracked, dry, barely forming breath into sound. But the word came out, clear enough for everyone to hear. "Aaliyah." Her heart stopped. Pierce's expression changed instantly, a mix of surprise and something darker. Carter raised an eyebrow, impressed. The nurse whispered, "He knows your name." But Aaliyah couldn't breathe, because his eyes, slowly, painfully, opened just enough to find her. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. She mattered to him, and that meant she was now part of something much bigger than she understood. When Ethan fully wakes, he reveals a shocking truth. The crash wasn't an accident. and the person responsible knows exactly who Aliyah is. Ethan's breathing steadied as Aliyah stood by his bedside, her hands trembling at her sides. His eyelids fluttered open fully now, unfocused at first, then sharpening just enough to meet her gaze. She felt the weight of that look. He wasn't just recognizing her. He was searching for something. Reassurance, safety, proof that she was really there. Pierce stepped forward immediately. "Ethan, sir, speak slowly. Do you remember what happened?" Ethan's eyes drifted toward his security chief, but his voice, broken and rough, didn't answer him. Instead, he whispered, "Where is she?" Aliyah blinked. "Me." He nodded weakly, then coughed from the strain. The nurse hurried over, adjusting his oxygen. Pierce frowned. "Sir, forget the girl. Focus. What do you remember about the crash?" Aliyah's chest tightened. She wanted to step back, out of the room entirely, but Ethan shook his head. "No. She saved me." Pierce's jaw ticked. "We know that, but we need details about the accident. Was it mechanical failure? A hit and run? Was someone following you?" Ethan closed his eyes, grimacing as flashes of memory clearly flooded back. His breathing hitched, his fingers tightened around the side rail of the bed. Then he opened his eyes again, and the fear in them was unmistakable. "It wasn't an accident." The room froze. Carter stepped closer. "Who caused it?" Ethan wet his cracked lips, struggling to speak. "Someone was waiting on the road, forced me off. I tried to get away, but—" He winced in pain. "He came after me when the bike went down." Aliyah's pulse skyrocketed. She remembered the man in the woods, the heavy footsteps, the scratched cheek, the way he stared without blinking. She whispered, "You mean the man who dragged you?" Pierce turned sharply toward her. "Dragged?" Aliyah swallowed. "Yes, we found blood leading into the trees, and someone was watching us, a tall man with a cut on his cheek." Ethan's eyes widened. "He followed you?" Aliyah nodded slowly. Ethan cursed under his breath, a raw, pained sound. "That man wasn't after me." Silence dropped like a stone. Carter narrowed her gaze. "What do you mean?" Ethan looked at Aliyah, not Pierce, not Carter, and the fear in his eyes deepened. "He was using me to get to her." Aliyah's breath caught in her throat. "Me? Why would anyone—" But Ethan wasn't finished. "That man," his voice strained, "he's been trying to find someone who matches your description for months." Aliyah felt the room spin. "My description?" Ethan nodded weakly. "A young girl, alone, no family, vulnerable." He swallowed hard. "He thinks you know something, or someone." Pierce stiffened. "This is absurd. She's a stranger. She's not connected to anything involving Mr. Solborn." But Ethan shook his head again. "No, she isn't a stranger." The room went silent. Aliyah stared. "What do you mean? I'm not a stranger?" Ethan took a shaky breath, gathering what little strength he had left. "Because I've seen you before." Aliyah's heart plummeted. "What?" Ethan's next words shattered everything she thought she knew about her own life. "You look exactly like the missing daughter of the man who stole millions from my company." The room went dead silent. Carter froze. Pierce's expression darkened. Aliyah felt cold spread through her veins. Missing daughter? Someone who looked exactly like her? A criminal connected to Ethan's billion-dollar world? None of this made sense. Ethan exhaled shakily. "And the man who tried to kill me thinks you're her." Aliyah staggered back, her hand gripping the bedrail for balance. Her whole life, every struggle, every lonely night, every unanswered question, suddenly felt like it was part of something bigger, something dangerous, something she never asked to be part of. And now Ethan, the one person she'd risked everything to save, was telling her she was in more danger than he ever was. As Aliyah tries to understand the truth about her identity, the man from the woods returns, this time stepping into the hospital. And he's coming for her. Aliyah's breaths came short and unsteady, her mind spinning with Ethan's revelation. Missing daughter. Stolen millions. Someone who looks exactly like me. It felt impossible. Unreal. Like a nightmare she hadn't woken up from, but Ethan's eyes held nothing but frightened certainty. Pierce stepped forward. This is too much for him. He needs rest. We can question the girl later. But Ethan shook his head weakly. No. She needs protection. Now. He'll come for her. Aaliyah's voice cracked. Who? Who is he? Before Ethan could answer, the lights in the hallway flickered, just once, but long enough to send a cold ripple down the back of Aaliyah's neck. Carter stiffened. What was that? Pierce reached for the pistol on his belt. Stay alert. That wasn't a power issue. That was... A loud crash echoed from the hallway. Something metallic hit the floor. Nurses screamed. The guard by the door shouted, Stop! You can't! Hey! Aaliyah froze. The voice that answered sent a jolt of ice through her blood. I don't want trouble! I just want the girl! The door was shoved open so hard it slammed against the wall, and there he was, the man from the woods. The scratch on his cheek deeper now, angry and red. His hood low over his eyes, his coat streaked with dried mud and blood. He stepped into the room like he belonged there, gaze locked on Aaliyah. Ethan's monitor spiked. No, stay away from her! Pierce raised his gun. Stand down! But the man didn't flinch. His eyes never left Aaliyah, cold, determined, and terrifyingly certain. You're coming with me, he said. Aaliyah stumbled back, her legs shaking. I don't even know you! He took another step. You don't have to. Your father does. My father? Her voice trembled. Ethan pushed himself up despite the pain. She's not who you think she is. The man snarled. She fits the description. The girl who vanished before her father robbed Soulborn blind, and I'm bringing her back whether she remembers or not. You're wrong, Aaliyah cried. I don't know anything about... But the man lunged. Everything erupted at once. Pierce fired. Carter tackled the man's arm. Ethan ripped off his oxygen mask, shouting Aaliyah's name. Aaliyah stumbled backward, crashing into the heart monitor. Security swarmed. Alarms blared. And finally, 3 guards forced the man to the ground, wrestling restraints around his wrists. He roared in frustration. She's the one! She's the girl! She belongs to him! Aaliyah covered her ears, shaking uncontrollably. Pierce snapped, Take him to isolation! Now! The man was dragged away, still screaming accusations that made Aaliyah want to disappear entirely. When the room finally quieted, Ethan reached a trembling hand toward her. Aaliyah, listen to me. You're not her. You're not that man's daughter. You saved my life. You're good. Tears blurred her vision. Then why did he come for me? Because some people see what they want to see, Ethan whispered. But I see you, who you really are. The nurse stepped in. He needs to rest. Aaliyah nodded numbly and backed out of the room, but Ethan stopped her with one last breathless whisper. Please, don't disappear. Not now. I owe you my life, and I'm not letting you go back to the streets. Aaliyah pressed her hand to the glass door, staring at him with a mix of fear, relief, and something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this terrifying night was the beginning of something better. If you want to know what happens next in Aaliyah's journey, how Ethan keeps his promise, and how her life changes after this night, make sure to subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life. Before you go, here's a sneak peek at the next heart-racing story. Black girl spent her last $8 helping Hell's Angel. Next day, 100 bikers brought a life-changing gift. She thought she was helping just one biker. She never expected an entire motorcycle club to show up the next morning, bringing something that would change her future forever. Click the next video to find out what unbelievable surprise those 100 bikers gave her.